Hey everyone, this is the second video of our climactic battle against Explicita Defilis, so if you haven't watched the first one yet, make sure you watch that up here somewhere. So now, this necrotically fueled bone naga has emerged in front of them, and it lifts up its tail, slamming it down, knocking the warlock and the rogue back. Bombador uses his spirit guardian to kill one of the Sturges, and he moves within line of sight of the Naga. As he sees it, he lifts up his hand and he casts Fireball directly on her. This ball of fire and energy falls down and explodes directly onto this Naga, and in the blast radius it also hits the archway with the portal and the dam that's holding the rest of the water behind it. The blast cracks the dam and water starts to emerge out of the cracks, flooding the area around the portal. The ranger breaks free of the Sturges and she climbs up one of these large rocky outcrops. She looks over and she has line of sight directly towards the Naga. She readies an arrow and she looses it, and as she does, she rolls a natural 20. The arrow slams into this bone Naga, and the critical hit ignites this concussive blast that pushes the Naga flying up against the dam, and as she hits, the levee breaks, and this torrent of water starts gushing out of this area, flooding the lower levels of this cave. And around this portal, a cyclone starts to emerge as water gets sucked into the vortex. The rogue lifts up his head, and for the first time, he looks directly into the portal. He sees a world that's covered with thunder clouds that are obscuring any sort of light, covering it in perpetual darkness. He sees miles blanketed with evergreens as they lead up towards this rocky outcrop, these mountains, and on the top of it, a Gothic castle that has a land bridge that leads directly towards the front. As he looks up this castle, he sees in the very top of this tower a figure staring down at the portal, his cape billowing behind him. This figure is lifting up his hand, and a dense fog starts rolling from the castle, coming directly towards the portal. And the player who plays the rogue is a veteran from 2nd edition D&D, and he looks at it with his mouth wide open and he says, "Oh my god, it's Ravenloft." The other players don't know what he means, but they can tell from his expression that it's not good. So they know that they have to close this portal as soon as they can. The rogue, desperate to end this fight, lifts up his hand and he casts Ray of Frost on the Naga, and ice crystals start to form around her. The water that she's submerged in starts to freeze around her, slowing her movements. But then, she breaks out of it. She retracts her head and she strikes down at him, knocking him unconscious. And then she lifts him up and her maw shakes him about and then throws him into the water in front of the portal about 20 feet. The other party members, helpless to do anything, witness as their friend gets thrown his unconscious body into the water. And normally, he would just drown. But he has this necklace of adaptation that he picked up previously that creates this air pocket in front of him, so his lifeless form still has air. But even then, his unconscious body starts to get pulled towards the vortex of the portal. Bombador sends his Echo with a rope sprinting over to the precipice, and the Echo cliff dives off into the water, going directly towards the rogue. As this has happened, the druid has broken his way free of the Sturges, and he rushes up towards the throne of Explicita Defilis. He looks around and he sees treasure chests just filled to the brim with all sorts of treasure. He sees gold and gems and adventuring gear that he thinks might be magical, and while no one is looking, he fills his bag up to the brim. The warlock stands up and he casts Armor of Agatha on himself, and in an attempt to distract the Naga from Bombador's rescue, he calls out to her. He yells out a challenge in her direction, saying that he was the one that killed her, and if she wants to, he's right there. The Naga gives in to the challenge and she redirects her attention towards the warlock. And Bombador swims out in this torrent, reaching out and grabbing onto the rogue before he's pulled into the vortex of the portal. And as this is happening, mist starts to emerge out of the portal. The bone Naga stares down at the warlock and she sways side to side, and then she arches her head back and she strikes down, biting onto his shoulder. But when she hits, she's also pierced with shards of ice, and the warlock who's holding onto her head yells, "Go to hell!" and he casts Hellish Rebuke. The Naga retracts her head and she screeches out into this cavernous expanse, and then the necrotic energy that was in her eyes fades, and for the second and final time, she falls down lifeless to the ground. And that is how this League of Misfits took down Explicita Defilis the big bad from against the cult of the reptile god. The party regroups, reheals, and rejoices. But unfortunately, their celebration is short-lived, because two problems still lie in front of them. One, the portal is still open, and it's fuming out mist. And two, the water is continuing to rise inside of the cave, and they don't know how to stop it. The children that were around them start to snap out of their brainwash, and they drop the weapons that they were holding, and they start grasping onto their heads. The party members all run forward, and they grab onto these children and embrace them and hold on to them. The warlock, looking over at the portal, thinks to himself that he might as well give it a shot, so he reaches into his bag and he pulls out this scroll of Dispel Magic. And then he says, "Here goes nothing." He focuses his energy directly at the portal, and now with no anchor to keep it open on this side, it flickers a couple times, and then it shuts down. The party members celebrate, and then they start planning their trek to see how they can return to the surface from this underground dungeon. As the water continues to rise, Bombador looks around, and then he exclaims to everyone, "Hold hands and close your eyes." And as he does, all the players grasp hands, and this flash of light happens, and then they vanish from the cave. The party members open their eyes and they find themselves in the shabby house in the middle of Orlane as Bombador's teleportation ends. The party members all rejoice and they embrace each other because they've now survived this entire dungeon and they made it out alive. They talk amongst each other and they decide that the first thing that they need to do is go talk to the mayor because they need to return these children towards their families, but also Traver, the mayor's bodyguard, is still stuck underground in the cave and they might need some way of contacting him. They arrive at the mayor's doorstep and he opens the door and sees them and he embraces all of them and takes the children inside and he invites them to go sit down in the waiting room. And as they do, they all slump down into the armchairs and the couches. After a little bit of time, the mayor returns the children back towards their families and he returns with refreshments. And he gets ready to hear this large tale that the heroes have gone through. The mayor reassures them that Traver will be all right, and if anyone can, Traver can escort the rest of the villagers safely back to Orlane. The mayor tells the party members that they have done a great service for Orlane, and even though they had a rocky start and several pitfalls, they've came through, and they rescued this village from the evil in this dungeon. He tells them that the villagers have suddenly returned to their old selves, and even though they remember a lot of the things that they were forced to do, they have returned to being peaceful and happy. As a thank you, the mayor tells the party members that he'd like to bestow onto them the deed of Shabby House, so anytime they're within the area, they can always use it as a base of operation. And on top of that, he'd also like to bestow onto them an awards ceremony in front of the entire village tomorrow, if he can. The party members, feeling as if they've earned the largest long sleep that they've ever had in their lives, decide to start getting ready for bed. And as the mayor is pulling out all these bed rests, he's telling them that there were a couple soldiers that came into town looking for them, and they are still there. They're still in the village over near the inn. The party members aren't really sure what they're going to do about this because they received the note saying that these soldiers might not be good news. So they decide they're going to deal with that the next day. As they get ready for sleep, all the different characters decide to go off and do a slightly different thing. The ranger, taking her bow that she received inside of the dungeon, starts putting it underneath the starlight, and she sees that it's starting to gather up energy, kind of recharging itself for multiple attacks. And as she looks up in the stars, she starts to remember all those creatures that she saw when her consciousness was taken to a different plane of existence, and the way that they looked at her, trying to observe her and kind of memorize every detail about her. And she feels, even now, that she might still be watched. The druid starts moving into a different area of the house, and he closes the door behind him, taking off his pack and looking at all the magic items that he's collected. And he reaches in and he pulls out this evil necrotic spell book, and he starts flipping through it, eager to absorb more evil knowledge. The rogue starts talking to the mayor about the Delian Order, and he starts asking them if maybe he knows a little bit about the local area and maybe some rumors about this collection of knights. The mayor tells him that now the temple has been purified, they can go visit the library in the morning and do a little research on this Order of Knights. The rogue starts thinking back on the time that he pledged himself to the Delian Order, where he said the oath, and how they appeared to him in spectral form, and he wonders to himself if maybe they've accepted him into their ranks. And finally, the warlock sits down next to the fire and he starts looking at his morning star. He thinks about all the different trouble that he's gone into and how many people he's been able to save with it, how many monsters he's been able to kill with it. And he starts to really show gratitude towards this weapon, that it's come to him and really helped him, even though he doesn't really know what it can do. And as he does, he perceives this mind, this sentience that's inside of the morning star, and it too shows him gratitude. And for a second, he starts to feel multiple entities inside of the weapon that are all collected and forming together. And that is where we ended our campaign. Thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure to make these, and we had a lot of fun running against the cult of the Reptile God. If you want to run your own D&D adventure, swing by Morgan's Comics, where they have a lot of the resources to get you started. I have a feeling that we haven't seen the last of this motley crew, and hopefully I'll be able to keep filling you in on their adventures. Everyone be safe out there. Bye now.